Graduated in 1976. Played football, decided to go into the Marine Corps, became a pilot in the Marine Corps, did 5.5 years in the Marine Corps, got out and worked for Procter & Gamble for 7.5 years, Frito-Lay for 3, Colgate-Palmolive for 6. And then I took a job, which I thought was the dream job, working as the vice president of manufacturing, making golf balls for Dunlap Schlosinger, which took me to the Southeast, South Carolina, which is where I'm currently living. After about 6 or 7 months, my boss and I agreed to disagree, and we decided to part ways. So I was determining whether or not I wanted to do my own thing or work for somebody else. So I decided to start up my own business. So I started doing speaking, business consulting, executive coaching, team building, strategic planning, started in 2000 using my network. And then in 06 and 07, when the economy tanked, people stopped spending money on training and development. I started doing professional recruiting. So I've been doing professional recruiting plus speaking and consulting, mostly recruiting over the last 15 years. And then just as COVID hit, I was transitioning to not doing recruiting and doing more speaking and business consulting and executive coaching. And about 2.5 years ago, I authored my first book called Sharp Leadership, Overcome Adversity to Lead with Authenticity, which basically talks about my life, talks about overcoming different things. In '83, after I got out of the Marine Corps, I was diagnosed with a tumor. So I had a tumor removed. And then 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So it talks about how to navigate life as well as its basic leadership principles that I learned at the Naval Academy, in the Marine Corps, worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies, working for a union, running a union plant, as well as working in the community and in the family. So it's an easy read, but it's got a lot of nuggets in it. I had a 10-year-old read it. I had a 90-year-old Naval Academy graduate purchase 10 books, 4 for his sons and 6 for his grandsons. I had a 17-year Marine Corps veteran, got out of the Marine Corps with post-traumatic stress disorder, became a substance abuser, then he became homeless. Now he runs a shelter for homeless veterans. He said it's the first book he ever read from cover to cover in his life. So I call it a manual for overcoming adversity in any environment, in any stage of life. So one of the things I primarily do now is I help individuals and organizations maximize their potential. Individually, I take an individual, and COVID is an example where it's just disrupted everybody's life. So there's several things you have to do to get back on track. You got to, number one, have a positive attitude. You got to create a routine. Then you got to have a strategy. So I help individuals do that. I've done a lot of work with transitioning military people. One of the things I know is that if you've been in the military for 90 days or you've been in there for 40 years, when you get out, there's a transition. And the transition is you're used to being around individuals that take care of each other, tell the truth, do what they say they're going to do. And then you enter an environment where it's the flip of that, right? So what happens is a lot of times military people will bounce around for a year, bounce around for another year, bounce around for another year, thinking there's something wrong with them. What the problem is, there's a misalignment of values. So anyway, I help with individuals with that. So I'm just glad to be here.
So how long were you in the Marine Corps then, Carl?
5.5 years.
5.5 years. And man, it sounds like you've had almost as much time dealing with survival on the outside, you know, with the tumors and whatnot, as you had on the inside. Like, can you talk a bit more to that? Like this whole surviving adversity thing is obviously near and dear to all of us right now. But I mean, that's a hell of a way to learn that lesson.
Yeah, well, I do believe that if you think about people that have exceeded against the odds, and we're talking about people that have done some extraordinary things, most of the time when you hear their story, they've had a story that's pretty brutal.
Tough. There's something tough in there.
Yeah, tough. So I'll use the pandemic as an example. Okay, so the pandemic hits, and there's a thing I call significant emotional events. A significant emotional event is an event that will rock your world. Things that are significant emotional events are divorce, death of a loved one, loss of job, or something like that, which causes you to stop, think, and do some things differently. The pandemic is a significant emotional event on steroids because you got all that stuff going on at the same time. You got death, you got no job, you got no money, you got all kinds of things going on. So through this adversity, just like I think it was John was talking about, he's talking about, okay, what's going to happen when this thing blows over? Like for me, when the pandemic hits, people aren't speaking, they're not doing crowds, nobody's hiring people because there's a lot of extra talent on the street. So I say, okay, so what do I have that I can use? So I said, I got 5,000 people on LinkedIn that I'm connected to. I have 3,000 people on Facebook. So I started mining that field, talking to people, developing relationships, and planted a lot of seeds. 3 or 4 months down the road, it's finally bearing some fruit. But, that was an example. And one of the things we learned at the Naval Academy is, you get a lot of stuff thrown at you. And for me, some of what was going on was, I'm going to take it a day at a time, and I'm going to keep it moving. And then eventually I'll graduate.
You get there one step at a time, right? One day at a time. Who said that? That's in the rate somewhere.